Some modifications are also to be done in two-shaft matting, that is basket weave. This is the modification of plane weave. Instead of single threads raised and lowered alternately in plane weave, here the warp threads are allowed to raise and lower 2-3 strands together and interlace with the weft, which also will be on 2 or 3 fold. Since the order of interlacement is only in 2 different manners, as in the case of plane weave, 2 heddle frames and 2 treadles would be sufficient for weaving this design. But for practical convenience, 4 heddle frames and 4 treadles coupled up in 2 pairs are used. In this case, the drafting order would be 1-2-1, 3-4-3, 2-1-2, and 4-3-4. After drafting the threads as above, the first and second heddle frames are tied together and is attached to the first and second treadles, which is also tied together, and third and fourth heddle frames are tied together and connected to third and fourth treadles. Thus, first and second treadles together works as first treadle, and third and fourth treadles works as second treadle. The weft threads are inserted 2 or 3 together in the same shed in the treadling order 1-2. The proportion of number of warp and weft can be varied to get different types of basket weave in coir industry. Matting in which 3 warp threads in pairs are raised and lowered, and interlacing with the weft threads in pairs is called saloon matting. Another matting having 2 warp raised and 2 lowered and weft interlaces in single or pairs is called Panama. The drafting order for this matting 1, 2, 3, 4. Next, ribbed matting. This fabric also are in one of the categories of plane weave, in which a rib-like structure exhibited in the surface. The base structure of the fabric will be plane weave. To obtain the ribs, a group of warp threads in the required proportion are allowed to work at a lower tension than the other warp threads. These lesser tensioned warp threads bend over the weft threads during the process of weaving to form the rib. These fabrics are comparatively heavier and denser than the ordinary plain matting. The structure of the matting can be varied by using different proportions for tight and slack warp threads. The proportions of warp threads commonly used for the manufacture of ribbed matting are given below: 1 tight, 1 slack, 1 tight, 2 slack, and 2 tight, 1 slack. For the weaving of this matting, the slack warp threads and tight warp threads are to be prepared on separate beams. A loom having 2 heddle frames and 2 treadles would be sufficient. All the tight warp threads are drawn through one of the heddle frames, and the slack warp threads are drawn through one of the heddle frames and the slack warp thread through other. The draft depends upon the proportion of tight and slack warp threads. In this case, 2 tight, 1 slack matting. The drafting is done by drawing 2 continuous threads of tight warp threads through one of the heddle frames and 1 slack thread through the other. The order will be followed for all the remaining warp threads The threading order is 1, 2.